Jobs here with the delightful Steve Leonard, contributor at ClearanceJobs, renowned author, academic. What else is it in your bio? Award-winning faculty member. I mean, this is a lot here. We're here to talk about our October book club pick. Hopefully, some of you read along with us. To Boldly Go: Leadership Strategy and Conflict in the 21st Century and Beyond. Talk to me about sci-fi and military leadership. A match made in, I don't know who made that match, Steve, other than you.
Yeah, no, actually, the match was made by a few people. And I didn't realize when we launched into this project just how many people were big fans of science fiction and how many people like to draw the link between leadership and conflict and strategy and science fiction. And then you get to talking to people, and then it all kind of makes sense, which is science fiction gives you, and fiction in general, gives you kind of a safe space to explore issues without having to be too detailed, too personal, you might experience something, but then you can say, hey, I feel like Princess Leia in Star Wars. It's like I got forced to wear a bikini and chained to some fat guy, and when really you're talking about having to work in a bad situation or something like that. So people could bring all these things to bear. We weren't sure this was going to be as good a project as it was or a successful launch as it was. But it's really playing out that way now, and you're seeing it all come together. And yeah, it turned out to be a really great idea. And the whole idea belongs to Mick Ryan, General Mick Ryan, who tweets as War in the Future from Australia. He's an Australian 2-star general who came up with this idea and sold me on it over dinner at West Point about 3 years ago.
Wow, so that's what was going to be one of my questions. There's a lot of content here and a lot of contributors, and I wondered how long it took from kind of the idea to getting all of these different voices together, putting together the framework, and also how you decided how you divided up the book too. Because I mean, there's just a lot of different themes and content there. Was that a really tough process?
That's a loaded question, because this is like not the first project that I worked on. And you learn something every time you do one of these anthology projects. And we brought all those lessons to bear here. And one of those lessons was pick the right writers. So find people that are actually interested in the genre, who actually are knowledgeable, who are good writers. And that's a long ask, but then you have to make sure that you're organized in a way that makes sense before you even start collecting content. Otherwise, you end up with these shotgun blasts of contributions that may or may not fit well. And I wanted to have a very select group of writers involved, but at the same time give them aim points. And so before we even started, we sat down with the publisher and said, this is where we're going to aim. We're going to talk about leadership writ large. We're going to talk about strategy, the development of strategy and how strategy plays out, technology and mankind, diversity as a subject, because you go through science fiction and there's so much diversity in science fiction. And then my favorite, toxic leadership, or the dark side of leadership, because you always have a bad guy. You always have a bad guy who's in charge, whether it's Darth Vader or the Emperor or Khan in Star Trek. There's always an antagonist, and those are great people to study too. And so you said, so when we reached out to people, said, hey, here are the different bins that you can write in. Just pick one, tell us what you want to write about, and then we just balanced from there. And what that saved us probably 6 months of trying to figure it out on the backside is, and I've been there where I don't know where this fits in. And what am I going to do with it? It's a great story, but it doesn't fit in anywhere. And this way we could make sure people were on target. And it just makes the organization of the book a lot easier, but it also makes it easier to sell it to a publisher because they know what they're going to get generally up front. They're not surprised anywhere. And I think that made it a lot easier to sell.
Yeah, no, and I love how you talk about this. You get to it at the end here where you talk about in is it the last chapter? Your last chapter anyway, the what if, the mirror cracked. You talk about the Star Trek Mirror episode, and how science fiction points you to all of those what ifs of leadership, which tees in well with, I really like Dan Ward kind of talked about how like the post-mortem concept, and how sci-fi is basically one giant, like if everything in the world goes wrong, this is it. And I had never thought about that before as being why sci-fi is a uniquely probably helpful or creative vehicle for any leader, but also military leaders, where you really are thinking like worst case scenarios. It could be, final battle scene type
Oh,
stuff.
absolutely.
And yeah.
Well, that's where fiction in general, especially well-written fiction that postulates a different history or a different future, becomes so interesting, because then it allows you to look at those situations and explore those circumstances through a different lens, that you're not doing it under a threat, I guess. So you're able to look at, hey, what happens if this goes wrong? The chapter on the stand, which was written pre-pandemic, is absolutely one of my favorites in the whole book, because you're like, uh, that chapter came at just the right time. It's like, look what could go wrong with a pandemic, and then boom, we're in a pandemic.
Yeah.
And to have the book come out, we're not through this yet, and so it's still quite relevant. But to be able to look at a pandemic through a fictional lens, and a Stephen King lens, no less, I mean, that's powerful. And each one of those chapters, there's something there that you can tease out that makes it fun, makes it relevant, makes it interesting.
Yeah.
I think, anyway.
Well, and I have to say, I don't know if I should admit how I read the book, and if you would agree with how I read the book. I did not read it like cover to cover. I read it like I kind of like read each chapter, because they are everybody has such a distinct voice. And even when you have even you as an author with multiple chapters in here, they're every chapter stands alone. I'm gonna date myself. I feel like it's the kind of book like your college professor would have printed off the pages and you just read this section. Do people do that anymore? And then you staple the corner and you pass it out in class. But anyway, I feel like there's a lot of I can see good military leadership conversations happening around a discussion point around a single chapter of the book. And is that,
Absolutely.
did you envision that people were kind of
Well, that was the idea, was that you'd be able to, even though you could put variations on a theme within a section, that each one of those, the intent all along was that they were standalone, that you could pull those out, that you can skip around. You don't have to read them in any certain order. Hey, I'm in the mood to read, something about technology, or I really feel like reading about Star Wars, or I want to read about Star Trek or Dark Helmet or whatever. You can flip around, find that chapter, read it, and you're not missing anything. You're just capturing it in its moment, and it just makes, I think it gives the reader a lot more freedom and flexibility to just do whatever they want to do with the book, which I think is valuable.
And I have to say, so I admitted this before we started the cult, sci-fi is not my genre. I feel like is now the time to admit, I don't think I've ever seen a single episode of Star Trek. But in going through this, I realized I dress up, I think, like a Star Trek character every day of my life, because I'm like a soccer mom. So I wear leggings and a tight fitted shirt. So I pretty much, if I added the logo, right, I'd be on, is it Starfleet right now? So I feel like I need to watch an episode. Is Mirror Mirror the episode I need to watch?
Oh, I mean, that's just one episode. We did. I did a podcast with Max Brooks, who wrote World War Z, about a month ago, and he brought up something that was really interesting, and what really marks the value of a series like Star Trek, the long-term value, is that you could watch a show and you could see the Klingons and Starfleet arming these different planets for something. And he said, really what you're watching is you're watching commentary about proxy war in the 60s. And you don't realize it, but there's so much behind every episode. Every episode is inspired by something that, the mirror universe, the whole, what if Lindy was bad? What would that world look like if Lindy was bad? And her whole, she controlled the world, and she got to do the things. I mean, that was Mirror Mirror. You wipe off all the persona that you have publicly. You flip that with your private persona, and that's what it is. And those are really interesting things to explore, because they stop and they make you think, and you can talk about them. I mean, I did a podcast in August with the Joint Geeks of the Joint Geeks of staff, and we got about 10 minutes into it, and it turned into a full-blown argument between 3 contributors and the host over whether or not Han Solo was a good general. And it was an argument. It wasn't a debate. And I just sat back, and the host said, "Do you have anything to add?" And I said, "No, this is what I want people to get from the book, is that you can read the book and it makes you argue about something or debate something, or, it stirs something up that hey, that guy sucked. And I'll tell you why. And he was a good tactician, but not a good strategist. He shouldn't have been a general. And it's just like this guy over here. And that's what you want. And to see it play out live on camera was perfect. That's exactly what you aim for. Is I'm going to give you a product that makes you think, and makes you argue about issues. And what you said about the chapters is really telling. And I don't usually tell everybody this, but picking a chapter length that perfectly coincides with the amount of time you would sit on the toilet. So 3,000 words is, a 5-minute read. And I know you laugh, but it's true. So you can sit down, you can plop down, read a chapter, close it, and you don't have to pick up where you left off. You can start new again. And so you don't feel like, oh, I got to keep reading because I don't know what happened next, because what happens next is something completely different universe, different contributor, different subject matter. And you can just skip all around the book like you did.
Awesome. To boldly go, on that note, we're talking about To Boldly Go. We hope you will pick up a copy, and Steve is just giving you permission to put it in your bathroom. So I'm just saying, but that is a good place because all your guests will see it. It will be a very popular, book. People will know. So yeah, I enjoyed the book. And again, I read it, piece by piece. And what I did appreciate the times when I did kind of binge it, because I am a bit of a binge reader sometimes too, was how you would pick up, even within the same chapter, people were addressing kind of generally maybe a same like topical overview, but taking a very different approach. Some people doing the very creative, like it was creative fiction I was reading. And then other times it was very much like a kind of a strategic analysis, like you said, character analysis.
Yeah.
How did that all come together? Did you give people kind of carte blanche to say,
carte blanche, you write your way? Absolutely. Yeah. I don't believe, I think I would say I took the mission command approach to this, which is, here's the broad intent. Here's what I need. I'm not going to tell you how to suck the egg, but I need the egg sucked, and you figure out how to do it. And that allows people to write in their own voice, their own way. There were a couple that we had to, kind of reel in a little bit, but just a couple. Most of these chapters were just, you'd get them the first time, and editing was easy and it was quick. Well, okay, I take it back. Editing was neither easy nor was it quick, but relatively speaking, because you had good, experienced authors and they brought their own unique voices to it, it made it a lot less painful than it might have been. I just realized I was talking to somebody who's done a lot of editing in her time, and editing is neither easy nor is it.
No, I am a fake editor from the day one when they gave me that title. I'm finally now been promoted into a title that actually fits, because I'm director of content, which is much more fitting because I enjoy content. My high school grammar teacher would be the first to tell you that editing is not necessarily my wheelhouse. And you've been a victim of my typos, Steve. So, I can't even count a bulleted list of 10 items. That is like, I'm going to remember that forever. My inability to do math. I have a few of those moments in my editing career, but good editing is hard. And there is just it's a unique way to look at a piece too, to have to edit it, not just for like, is this written well, which again, you're dealing with good writers. So you probably had that, but again, figuring out, does this piece kind of fit in with again, does it fit with the broad strokes you're trying to accomplish? And you did a great job, again, whether you picked the right contributors that would be able to do that, or how it all came together, because again, you have a lot condensed into a, relatively, a short book, or at least concise chapters. And it made me want to explore the sci-fi genre. So, hey, I'll have to spend some time.
Good. That's the other piece of this that I thought was interesting, and what I shared with the contributors is, as we finished up the editing process, is I told them that my mark of a good chapter was a chapter that made me want to go back and read or watch something again, because I hadn't seen that particular aspect of it, and I found myself going back to watch The Expanse or going back to watch a Star Wars movie. Just to see it again, and then to use what they shared as my lens for watching. And I was amazed at how much I wanted to go back and see things. And I don't have enough time in the day to go back and watch all that, but I want to. And it's just fantastic.
Well, and the breadth of the genre too is like that's probably one of the reasons it's a helpful genre for, exploring military leadership topics, because there are often in sci-fi, again, we've reached the end of times, things are stark, somebody is leading, there's some kind of big catastrophic problem that needs to be solved. But we have, like, again, conventional, like, I've obviously watched, the Star Wars films, and that's kind of, the everyman sci-fi. I don't know, is that, but then you also have like a lot of, again, niche stories that I had never heard of, that I kind of got an introduction into, like, what is this narrative? And again, it made me either want to learn more about that, or even if I hadn't, though, it gave me an insight into the problem or some of the complexity, or something that was happening within that narrative that piqued my interest. And again, it made me want to talk about it too. So it is, I said before, for the price, it ought to be a textbook, but then also in the sense, like, it's something I want to read and talk about with somebody else when I finish too. Like, it's just a very conversational, like, it makes me want to, oh yeah, we should watch that. We should watch Planet of the Apes and see if we pick up on the same things that Steve talked about.
Oh, see, I grew up watching stuff like that. And it was interesting, that chapter, I can't talk enough about that chapter, because I grew up when the only way you could watch Twilight Zone was through reruns. And although I watched the Planet of the Apes movies, I had no idea that Rod Serling, who created Twilight Zone, wrote the original screenplay, until I started to look at the chapter. I was like kind of laying out my ideas for the chapter and how I wanted to really play off of the initial monologue that launches that movie, and Beware the Beast Man, and tie all that together, that whole thread through there. And it was probably like the first 10 minutes I was reading something and it said Rod Serling's original screenplay, and I'm like, get the heck out of here. And that took me down a completely different path. And then you start to pull in how he used his personal life experiences to drive that screenplay. And even though there were other writers that came along afterwards and changed little things, that what he initially started with was always there. And it's almost like an episode of Twilight Zone, right down to the twists and how he works in the twists in the screenplay. It's almost not at all like the original book, which was written by a French author. But it's like a 2.5 hour long episode of Twilight Zone, and I just loved it. And I watched the movie again, and I'm like, holy cow, this is Rod Serling, and I never picked that up. I don't know how I missed it, because I've never missed an episode of Twilight Zone or Night Gallery or any of those kinds of things that he did. And it has all the hallmarks of classic Rod Serling, and what that means, though, it's interesting, because then you realize it opens up another doorway into someone's mind, and how their mind works, and how they bring their own experiences to bear whenever they write. And that's, we do it all the time, but I guess I never thought that somebody like that would be writing about his upbringing and what it felt like to be ostracized and, kind of slid off in a corner for who he was, and, and then how that play out in the film. It's interesting. Yeah. Fascinating.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think you read a lot of these and you want to find out more about the backstory behind, how those narratives came to be. And again, just kind of tying back to the last few chapters where we talk about, I mean, there are a lot of leadership lessons to be learned. Again, it's basically the sci-fi genre is a giant, post-mortem. And I think a lot of the folks who have maybe lived or played in this genre were kind of realizing, again, we're self-actualizing or somehow manifesting some of the, either their creative process through that. And again, I think for leaders or people working, in the military space, there's definitely a lot of lessons learned, but it's also just fun. So I want to emphasize that too, because I'm clearly not going to, nobody's going to, I don't think pink hair, I know they've changed the requirements, but I don't think I'd be leading any troops into battle anytime soon. But it was still relevant for me to read sitting here in my home office.
Well, that's the whole idea, is that it's in every person's book. You know, it didn't have to just be something that was aimed at military people. I didn't want that. I wanted it much more broad. So anybody who understands what it's like to lead or to plan or to interact with other people, or they're fans of science fiction, or they're fans of a specific series or show or book, will find something in here. So it's in every person's book that they can just pick up and indulge in and have fun with.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. On that note, I don't have anything else. Anything else to add, Steve, about To Boldly Go?
No, just find it, read it, have fun with it, and enjoy it.
And you can get it on Amazon. I noticed when it first came out, some of your fans are complaining about the lead time, but it picked up quick. I think and that's like a good problem to have. I think you sold out the first batch fast.
Sold out the first printing.
We're all used to being able to order anything on Amazon and get it in 2 days, and people are like, "What? It's going to be a week? Insanity!"
It's crazy. But that was, like you said, it's a nice problem to have. I don't think anybody anticipated that the first printing would sell out in advance sales. And it sold out probably about 2 months before publication, and they had to start up a second print and get the second print delivered, and it threw everything off. And so the second print didn't deliver till after publication day. And it could have been better. It could have been worse, because the publication date at one point was early September, and I urged them push it back to the end of September. But that was more for marketing purposes. If we had published in the beginning of September, people would have waited a month and a half for books.
Hey, I mean, it's good. That anticipation, it makes you like really long for what you get. That's how I felt. I was like, this is a hot commodity here. And now that I finally have my copy, although now I know I have to put it in the bathroom. So that's just,
No, see, but once you put it in the bathroom, you enter George Costanza's world, and you can't take it back to the bookstore. So you take it in the bathroom, you own it.
Oh, that's true. Well, nobody's going to take it back. Who returns books these days? Books live forever. My favorite is, I love to annotate my books and underline and draw little hearts and emojis and like special things in it, and then like potentially pass it along. I can't wait for the person who inherits all of my inscribed books. But this one I'll keep forever, Steve, just for you. So this is going on my shelf.
Well, eventually you're going to pass that on. So hopefully one of the 4 little people that lives in your house will inherit that.
I feel like my son was made for the sci-fi genre, so I feel like I need to. You're gonna have to, like, but the 10-year-old. What's the 10-year-old entry point into sci-fi? Does he? Maybe Star Trek. We can start watching Star Trek together. I don't know.
Yeah.
What's appropriate for the children anymore in sci-fi?
Star Trek Lower Decks. The cartoon. It's a fantastic cartoon. Just watching the first season.
Star Trek Lower Decks. Okay, I got my takeaway. I got to start.
It's like watching Family Guy, but it's Star Trek.
Family Guy is not appropriate for 10-year-olds, right? Is it?
Well, this is probably not always appropriate for 10-year-olds either, but you might want to screen it first.
Okay, I'll screen it on all my free time. I'll screen it. It'll be at my level though. I'll be able to enter into the Star Trek universe again. Since I dress like a Trekkie every day of my life, that's how I realized I'm gonna start requiring Athleta to put like Starfleet logos on all these turtlenecks.
Now I'm gonna have that mental image stuck in my head.
Starfleet coming at you. Anyway, on that note, thank you so much. Pick up your copy of To Boldly Go wherever fine books are sold. And thank you so much, Steve, for chatting with me today.
Thanks for having me.